Welcome back to the Unlicensed Therapist. Pull up a seat, make yourself comfortable. My name is Matthew Grimm, and I am your host for today's episode. If you've listened to our first and second episodes, thank you for the support. If this is the first time you're listening to us, thank you and welcome to our community. I'm not sure if you were aware, but when it came to starting this podcast, I had a lot of doubt. People might think that I had no idea what I was talking about, that you'd catch me and call me out as a fraud. I was jittery, I was nervous, but I pushed through it. This is something called Imposter Syndrome. And I didn't just feel it during starting a podcast, I've felt it many times throughout my life, particularly during practicum, internship, and as I was stepping into the professional world. Not to say that those were the only times or that it hasn't continued, but that feeling, I don't know enough and someone's gonna call me out on it, is perfectly natural. I'm betting that you have had those feelings too. If that's the imposter syndrome, what do? Well, first we learn that the imposter syndrome isn't just a lack of confidence. It's a misalignment between how competent you actually are and how competent you feel you should be. It's where you fall into what I call the healer's myth. This idea that to help someone, we must be perfectly polished, fully healed human beings ourselves and possess an encyclopedic knowledge of the human psyche. Number one, if we are therapists, we should be in therapy ourselves. Not only because of all the trauma we hear, we should practice what we preach. As for having that encyclopedic knowledge, the reality, the more we learn about counseling and psychology is going to come from being in the field, doing the job. We're going to realize how much we don't know the more we grow. And that's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of our growth. There is a name for the opposite of imposter syndrome, and that is the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's when people with low ability overrate their competence. If you're worried you're a fraud, it's actually a biological signal that you are self-aware enough to be dangerous in the best way possible. Today, we're going to dismantle the trap, look at how it shows up in your body during a session, and give you a survival kit. Before we touch on how to manage imposter syndrome, first let's look at where does it live. I want you to take either your left or right hand, stick it out in front of your face, palm facing towards you. And I want you to take your thumb, bring it in across the inside of your hand, and then the remaining 4 fingers bring down across so that you're making a fist, and you can see your knuckles right now and a part of the thumb under those fingers and knuckles. And what we're looking at is a representation of the brain. This front part where the knuckles are is that prefrontal cortex, that logic center of the brain. The back part of the hand is the most ancient emotional section of the brain. The wrist and arm going down, there is your brain stem. A great way to look at the brain. We have that client who comes in. We begin to have a feeling of panic, a feeling of I don't know what to say, a feeling of I need to prove to them that I am knowledgeable. That is coming from your amygdala. If we open up those fingers, where that thumb is lying is approximately where our amygdala lies in the brain. And our amygdala is our security system. As a Star Trek fan, what it does is it screams, "Red alert! Red alert! Red alert!" It is our fight, flight, freeze, faint response. If you think about it, each of those things that I described, you either want to run out of the room, you want to prove the person that you're knowledgeable, there's your fight, you don't know what to say, there's your freeze, your faint, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So we have that going off in our body. And we're going to have a lot of clients coming in with that going off in our body. So the question then becomes, what do we do? Well, what would we tell our clients to do? The first thing we would say is breathe. Now, as someone who has had panic attacks and has had someone stand in front of them and say, just breathe, I can promise you that the thoughts in my mouth begin with the F-bomb and were followed by not really caring about breathing in that moment. You really have to slow yourself down and realize that taking that deep, slow breath in and that long, slow exhale out is going to help bring you down a step. It's going to help self-regulate. We know where the imposter syndrome lives. We know that if we're breathing deep and slowly, we can at least take it down one step. Now, we need to look at how are we seated. If I'm in my seat and I'm clutching the armrests and I'm sitting with my posture perfect, rigid as a board, because I want to look like a serious therapist, like the thinker statue, all I'm doing is creating tension in my body, and that client is going to walk in, they're going to pick up on that tension that I have in my body. They're going to realize something's not right. So we need to relax. Let's put your feet flat on the floor so that we feel literally grounded in that office, just like we're going to tell our clients to do. Take a nice deep breath in through your nose, hold it, and out through your mouth. And even if we're mentally hyperventilating, we want to make sure that we're not letting that happen, because if it's even just in our mind, that amygdala is still going to think there's a bear in the room and set off that red alert. Relax your muscles. When you soften your body, you send a signal to your brain that says, I am safe. You feel safe, you're going to allow that logical part of your brain, the clinical part of your brain, to be able to take over. And that's when you're able to remember the unconditional positive regard, and you come back fully online. Let's break down 3 concrete actions you can take right now to manage that feeling of panic during your first clinical placement, during any clinical interaction. Number 1, embrace the trainee role. Stop trying to act like a licensed clinician. You're not one yet. Yes, are you going to have individuals step into your office and demand to see someone with quote-unquote experience, who's not an intern, who has a license? Absolutely. 9 times out of 10, you're in community mental health, which means the reality is there is no one or very few licensed individuals in community mental health compared to the number of interns and trainees and supervisees. Number 2, you're supposed to ask questions. This is your time to jump in, but I set up a situation a moment ago that you're probably saying, but what do I do? How do I get out of that situation where someone is demanding to see someone who has a license, who is more experienced than I am? And this is where we come back with the power of transparency. Let's be open and honest. I just told you that in community mental health, there is very few, if any, licensed individuals, and that community mental health runs on interns and trainees. Being honest with a client, telling them in a professional, soft manner, in a manner that is open and honest, that can be used to build that therapeutic alliance. See, we keep going back to the previous episode here, can not only give you a feeling of it's okay, but can help the client understand how counseling works. Being open and saying, my name is Matthew Grimm. I am currently in my internship. I am being supervised by this supervisor in the agency, and I have a supervisor outside of the agency that I speak with. Both of these people support me. When I go and I speak with either of them, the supervisor inside of the agency can obviously look into our health records and see who is on my caseload. That doesn't mean that I'm telling them every bit of information. I may be using your first name and what my question is. As for the person outside of the agency, I have a person who identifies as this gender, who is approximately this age. I might include a diagnosis and then go in with my question. It is set up in a manner that the person outside of the agency could be your roommate and wouldn't know that I was talking about you. But it's a way in which I can get help to help you, and there are times that you're going to ask some wonderful questions, and I may come back and say, because I'm a trainee, I have to run this past my licensed supervisor because it's just outside of my scope. There are going to be other things that are going to be perfectly within my scope, and I will let you know if something is outside of my scope. This is a great way to not only build a knowledge base for yourself and begin to grow with the client, but allow the client to understand that not only are you there to help them heal, not only are you there to learn, but you're going to stick to extremely high ethical standards to ensure that they get the best possible care out there. Number 2, create a competency menu. When imposter syndrome thrives, it thrives on generalization. Thoughts like, I'm bad at everything. We fight with the specificity. So I want you to get paper, something to write with, and I want you to make 3 columns. One column should be titled confident, the second column should be titled tolerable, and the last column should be titled panic-inducing. And this is where we're going to list things within the role as a counselor that we feel confident in doing, tolerable in doing, and things that are absolutely panic-inducing. If I were to do this right now, I might say that showing empathy, I'm confident in. I am confident in active listening, and I am confident in using my DBT skills. Tolerable, I would list that intakes are tolerable. I am making attachment theory more tolerable for myself. Silence is becoming tolerable. Panic-inducing, I think handling crisis calls are always going to be panic-inducing on some level. Someone coming in with a diagnosis that I just disagree with is panic-inducing to me. And obviously when you have someone yelling at you, that can be panic-inducing. So that's how I might break that down. Now, I currently am in consultation for neurodrama and therapeutic tabletop role playing, and my consultant had me do an exercise where I was to list what by this point I felt I knew and what I didn't know. Very, very similar to what we just talked about. And by listing those things, I sent them to my consultant. And then the next time we met, we focused on the things I didn't know. And there were about 7 things in that section. And we were able to get rid of 3 of them off the top because I'd had time to process that information and was able to add on that there were some things that were listed because I'm not comfortable with because I just didn't have the confidence yet. My consultant was able to either give me knowledge that made me more confident or let me know what they were going to do to provide me with the skills to feel more confident. We then could tackle the other 5 things on that list, and we broke them into a group of 3 and a group of 2. That's sort of what we're working on as we move forward now. So for you, you may be taking our competency list and you may be looking at the panic inducing things and taking that to your supervisor. And instead of saying, I'm failing, you can say, I feel really confident in my empathy, but I need specific training on my panic inducing list. I need real help with, and fill in the blank. Now, our third and final strategy, while it's lovely, I'm not sure how realistic it is, and you may need to tweak it for realism. And that's the idea of the 10-minute prep and the 10-minute cleanup rule. And the moment you leave a session, your imposter voice starts screaming. If 10 minutes before a session starts, you spend that 10 minutes reviewing notes and setting one specific goal. And it can't be something broad like, I'm going to be a good therapist, but instead maybe it would be, today I will focus on using 2 reflections and 1 open-ended question. When I finished up my grad program, I went directly in and got basic trained in EMDR. So I used this method to say, today I'm going to identify 1 to 2 clients that might be good to identify and utilize EMDR. And that was the goal right there. And you can use that same type of skills to just say, hey, instead, I'm going to use those 2 reflections and 1 open-ended question. Now there's the 10-minute cleanup. Immediately after you're done with your session, write down 1 win and 1 learning edge. And you're going to take those to your supervisor so that you can say, I did this really great thing, and here's 1 thing that I need to learn. And the idea is it prevents the session from looping endlessly in your mind. The reality is, in community mental health, we are typically stacked back to back to back to back to back with clients. So to say, I have 10 minutes of prep time or even 10 minutes between clients is not realistic. You may have 10 minutes of prep time before your very first client if you get to work early, and you may have 10 minutes of prep time during your lunch. But other than that, you may not have that time for every single client between them. So you may be making that goal at the very beginning of your day, checking it at the middle during your lunch, and then during your cleanup process at the end of the day. Is a little bit more work? Yes. Will it help to push off that imposter syndrome? Will it help you to take the things that you need to take to your supervisor? Absolutely 100%. Let's go a bit deeper into why the imposter syndrome trap is so sticky. For so many of us in the helping profession, I think we can be broken down into 2 categories, two types. There's the type A overachiever who spent their lives getting the A and the gold stars, and then there is the creative type who goes on the feelings. So there's the one that's more analytical and the one that's more feeling. Counseling is both an art and a science. And when you fall into one of those categories exclusively, you miss out on a portion of what therapy and counseling is, and you use something called perfectionism as your shield so you don't get criticized. They both use perfectionism as a way to protect them from their shame, because we think if we do the session perfectly, we can't be criticized. But perfectionism really, it's the enemy of a therapeutic alliance. If you're too focused on saying the perfect therapeutic response, you aren't actually listening to the person in front of you. You're listening to your own internal critic. In the world of psychology, Donald Winnicott famously talked about the good enough mother. He argued that a mother doesn't need to be perfect. She just needs to be good enough to meet the child's needs. And I want you to adopt the good enough therapist mindset. That doesn't mean that you're not putting your all in or that you're just half-assing it. That means you're saying, am I present? Am I being ethical? Am I listening? And if you answer yes, you're doing the work. The breakthroughs aren't your responsibility. The process is. Your supervisor and the time you spend with them in supervision is your lifeline. You need to use that time effectively. This week, I want you to try two things during your supervision. Ask your supervisor for their imposter story. What was the moment in their early career when they felt the most out of their depth? You hearing that your confident, licensed supervisor at one time felt clueless, just like maybe you're feeling, is going to be incredibly validating. Request to have observed work time. Ask that supervisor to sit in or watch a recording, and when they do, don't just ask, how did I do? Ask specific questions. Get specific feedback to counter your anxieties. So ask something like, I was trying to use motivational interviewing technique there. What nonverbal cues did I miss? So that you get the answers that you're seeking. A note to the general public. If you're a client listening to this, know that a therapist who uses supervision is actually providing better care. It means they have two, maybe even three brains looking at your case instead of one. It's a sign of high-level professional ethics, not a lack of skill. The imposter syndrome trap is not a personality flaw. I think we've covered that this week. What we've learned is it's a developmental stage, something that you will grow out of and learn from. You feel it because you're stretching. Your challenge for this week in your next session or class, I want you to intentionally own one thing you don't know. Whether it's with a peer or a supervisor, say, I'm not sure about that yet, but I'm learning. See how it feels to let the mask slip just a little. Next week, we're diving into finding your counseling identity. We'll talk about how to stop playing the role of therapist and start being yourself in the room. If this helped today, subscribe so you don't miss next week. Share this with at least one person in your cohort who maybe looks like they're holding their breath. Let them know they can exhale. I am so proud of the work you're doing. Remember, We will always be unlicensed as long as we continue to learn. We'll talk again next week.